Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel MiTutorials. This is the fifth week of the Introduction to Python series on my channel. In the last week, we learned about the NumPy library. We learned how to create an array using the NumPy library. We also learned how to create matrix. We learned how to perform arithmetic calculations, and we learned how to transpose a matrix, find min and max value, and how to access elements from the matrix. And in this week, which is week 5, we're going to learn about the Pandas library. Now, Pandas library is one of the very basic library which is used every single time when you talk about data analytics. The Pandas library is basically used for working with data sets. It has functions which can analyze the data, it can clean the data, it can manipulate the data. So in simple terms, if I have to explain, think of it this being like an Excel spreadsheet where you have a table and you can manipulate the data, you can analyze the data, you can create pivot tables, etc. and all of that. So it is very similar to that. So using the Pandas library, we can load data from different file objects. What I mean by this is you can load data from CSV files, from Excel files, from JSON files, from HTML, from SQL, etc. You can do all of that loading using the Pandas library. Pandas is used because it is fast and efficient when you're trying to manipulate or analyze the data. It is easy to handle the missing data, which is represented as NaN, which is NaN values. And within the data frame, the columns can be inserted, deleted. It also has the flexibility to reshape and pivot the data. And it has some time series functionalities and a lot of powerful group by functions. So I'm going to teach you some of the basics and how to use Pandas and how to import the Pandas library and get started with Pandas. So let's get started. So in the last week's tutorial, we learned how to import the NumPy library. We wrote the command import NumPy as NP, wherein NP was the alias for the NumPy library. And over here, we can do something similar, but replace here with Pandas. We can say import Pandas as PD. Now this is the standard nomenclature to use PD for Pandas. So let's run this and let's import the Pandas library, and we'll also import the NumPy library in this case. So first, let's start with creating a list. We are very familiar with creating a list now. We have seen this in the earlier tutorials. So I'm defining a new variable called as price list and passing in these values to a list. And let's create a list. And these are the values which are created within this particular variable called as price underscore list. And let's pass in this particular list and let's create an NumPy array. So we did this, we saw this in the last week tutorial, np.array, and then we can pass in the price list that we just created. And now we can see that we have now created an array of all of these elements within that particular array. And now we can convert the array or the list that we created using the Pandas library, and we can convert this to a series. So this is the new variable that I'm creating called as price series list, and this is the function using the Pandas library. I'm calling Pandas library over here pd.series. Remember that this is case sensitive, so s needs to be capital. So we're creating a new series pd.S series, and within the parenthesis, we're passing in the list that we created, which is the price list over here. And likewise, I'm also creating another series called as price series array, and I'm calling the function pd.series, and within parenthesis, I'm passing in the array that we have created over here, which is price underscore array. So let's run this code over here and let's print out the array first over here. And now we can see that it has created a Pandas series, and it has also added the index values to these elements over here. When we created the list or the array, we only saw the values that we passed in this particular list, but we never saw the index values. But when we created a Pandas series, it has automatically added those index values. And remember, in Python, the index value starts at 0. So it has created an index column as well, starting from 0 until 5. And likewise, if we print the price series list that we created over here, it's going to return the same output over here. You can create a Pandas series either using a list or an array. So the Pandas series has added the index value starting from 0 until 5, but we do not want to see these numbers. We want to see the actual names or categories against these indexes. For example, in my case over here, I have the price list of the fruits, and I want to replace the index values with the fruit names that we have over here. So I'm going to create a new Pandas series called as price underscore labeled. I'm using the function pd.series and I'm passing the price list over here. This is the list that we created earlier. I'm passing that particular list over here. This is the first argument, comma, and then I'm saying my index values are going to be these within this particular list over here. So when I run this code over here, a new variable gets created, price labeled, and when I print the price labeled over here, you will see that the index values have now been replaced by the values that I have passed in this particular list, which is orange, banana, apple, etc. So we can see that we have orange, the price is 20, banana, the price is 45, etc. We can also perform some calculations. So I have the Pandas series, which is price underscore label, and I'm creating a new variable over here called as price labeled updated price. And then what I'm saying is I'm calling the variable price labeled, which is the Pandas series, and then I'm adding 10 to that particular series. So when I click on run over here, and when I call this particular variable, you will see that we've added value 10 to all of these elements in that particular series. So you can see that 20 has now become 30, 27 has now become 37. So this is how you can add values or perform calculations to a Pandas series. We can also perform calculations using another list. Let's create a new list over here called as new price and pass in these values within that particular variable. This is a list that I'm creating and assigning it to the variable new price, and then I'm creating a new variable here called as difference, and my new price, which is these values in this particular list, and I'm subtracting that with the price labeled updated price that we created over here. So let's see when I run this what happens. So I've run this, and then when I call the difference variable, you can see that it has now subtracted the new price, which is 35 minus 30, and it has returned the value as 5. And likewise, 66 minus 55, it has returned the value as 11 against banana. So we looked at the series now. Let us look at the Pandas data frame. Now, Pandas data frame is a two-dimensional tabular data structure. It is very similar to what you see as an Excel table, which contains rows and columns. You will see something similar to that when you use the Pandas data frame. So let's see how we can create this. So I'm creating a new list over here called as brands, and then I'm passing in these values within that particular list and assigning it to the variable brands. And I'm creating a new data frame called as brands underscore df is equals to pd.dataframe. This is the new function that I'm passing over here called as data frame within the Pandas library. So pd.dataframe within the parenthesis, I'm passing in the list that we have, which is brands, and then I'm saying columns is equals to brand name. So what this particular line of code is going to do is it is going to create a table with one column, and the name of the column is brand name, and these are the rows in that particular column. So let me just quickly run this code and you will see what is happening. So you will see that we've now created a column brand name, which we have passed over here, where we said columns is equals to, this is the brand name. This is the name of the column that we passed. That is exactly what we see over here. And these are the values in that particular column, which is Audi, BMW, Mercedes and Jaguar. And you will see that by default, the data frame adds the index values beginning from 0. Now let's say how we can create multiple columns. So I have created a new list over here called as model, wherein I'm passing in all the model names of these brand names, and then I'm creating a new variable called as cars. So I'm calling in a function from the Pandas library called as pd.dataframe. Data frame is the function name which helps us in creating a data frame, and within the data frame and within the parenthesis over here, I'm passing in a dictionary. I hope you remember from our previous tutorials, when we create a dictionary, we have the first value as the key, or we can now call that as a column name, and after the key we pass in the values, which is the brands list over here. These are the rows within that particular column, and this is our second column or second key in this case, which is model, and we are passing in the model names that we have created over here. So when I run this code over here, you will see that we've now created a table with two columns, brand and model, and we passed in the list that we created, and now we have a table like structure. And also notice that it has created the index values, or it has added the index values automatically to this particular table. We can also create a data frame using random values. So now over here we are going to use pandas as well as the numpy to create a table, or what we call as a data frame. So I'm calling in the function pd.dataframe, and within the parenthesis I'm using the numpy library, and I'm using the random.randn function of 8, 3. I'm passing in the values 8, 3, meaning that this is 8 rows and 3 columns, and my column names are these, the list 1, list 2 and list 3. And I'm calling I'm printing the data frame that we are creating over here. When I run this code over here, you will see that we've randomly created a table over here with 3 columns and 8 rows. And now let's look at how can we access or modify rows and columns within the Pandas series. So let's create a new list over here called as category. I have all the categories which I'm creating a list, and then I have the sales amount against that particular categories, and then I'm creating a new series using the pandas function pd.series. I'm passing in the sales values over here, and my index value, remember when I created the pandas series over here, it created the index values as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in this case, I don't want the index values to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead, I want the actual category names over here. So what we're doing is we're saying index is equals to category, which are these names in this particular list. So when I run this piece of code over here, we will see that we've got the category names and the respective sales amount for that particular category. You will see that snacks is 225. Snacks is the last value in this list, and you will see that the value over here is also 225. We've created a Pandas series over here. So like we saw earlier how we access the rows, this is the similar way. We're using the df over here, and we are calling in the variable df over here and then passing in the index value 1 to get the second row in our data set. And when I run this code, you will see the value as 212, which is in over here. So this is the 0th index and this is the first index. If you want to access, let's say, first to fourth row, you can pass in variable df, and within the square brackets you can say 0 is to 4. And when I run this code, you will see that we've now accessed first to the fourth row. Now let's say you want to access multiple elements which are in different index position. Let's say you want to access index position 0, 3 and 6. What you can do is you can pass that as a list. So you notice that I have 2 square brackets over here, and when I run this code, you will see that it has now fetched the 0th index, it has fetched the 3rd index, and it has fetched the 6th index value from that particular series. You can also access the elements using the labeled index. So when I say labeled index, I'm talking about the index values that we passed in within that particular list, which is bakery or beverages, etc. And I can call in simply by variable and passing in the labeled index value within square brackets. And when I run this, I will get the value 207, which is exactly what we have over here. And if you want multiple labeled index, you will have to pass in a list within the square brackets over here. And when I run this code, you will see that we've now got the values for food, grains and beverages. And now let's look at how do we create a data frame using the pandas library. And now I'm creating a new variable called as courses, and then I'm using a dictionary. I'm passing in these values. This is the key and these are the values within that particular key. I have course ID, or consider this as a column, and these are the rows within that particular column. So I have my course ID column, I have course title, I have level, and then I have duration of that particular course. So let's run this code. You will see that we've now created a variable, and when I call this particular variable, you will see something like this, which is a dictionary, which we have seen earlier as well. And you will notice that this is not very readable, and to make this readable, we can use the pandas data frame function to convert this particular dictionary into a proper table like structure, which is called as a data frame. So let's call in the function pd.dataframe and pass in the dictionary that we have created over here, and I'm assigning this particular data frame to the variable called as df underscore courses. So let's run this code and let's call in the variable over here. And now you will see that we have a proper table that is created along with the index column. We have course ID, we have course title, we have level, and then we have duration. And like we saw earlier on accessing the rows within the list or an array or a series, it is very similar in this case as well. We can access the first row in the data frame using the square brackets, and you can pass in the values something like this: 0 is to 1, which will fetch us the 0th row. Remember that the second value over here is excluded. So when you pass in 0, it's not going to return any data for you because there is no rows that you are looking at. But when you say this as 1, it's going to return the 0th index value or 0th row over here, which is 41215. And when you change this to 2, it will return 0 and 1. Right? And you can access first 3 rows in the data frame like we just did over here. Let's say df underscore courses, 0 is to 3, and now we have 3 rows from that particular data frame. And you can also access the column just by calling in the name of that particular column. And when I run this code over here, df underscore courses, and within single quotes I pass in the name of the column, and I get all the values within that particular column. I can also access multiple columns by just passing in a list within the particular variable over here, which is df underscore courses. And when I run this, I will get the output as course title and level. There are also other ways to fetch rows and columns from a particular data frame. So one of the method to fetch the rows and columns is the loc or the loc method, LOC. So the syntax of the loc function is we pass in the row value and the column value. So let's call in this function. So first over here, I need to define the data frame, which is df underscore courses dot loc, and then I'm passing the 0 is to 2. So remember, when I'm doing this, it is only referring to the rows over here. I do not have a comma over here, which means that it is going to extract all the columns within that particular data frame. So let's run this code and see what happens. And you will see that it has now returned 0, 1, and 2 rows over here. And this has also returned all the columns within that particular data frame. And now let's say if you want to access rows as well as only a couple of columns. So what we can do is we can pass in the values 0 is to 2, comma, and then here we will have to pass in the actual names of that particular column. In this case, it is course ID and duration. I need course ID and then I need duration. So I will have to pass in the names of that particular column within a list over here. So when I run this code over here, you will see that we've now got 0 to 2, the index rows over here, and then only the course ID and the duration column from that particular data frame. Likewise, I can say that I need the index value 1 and 3. I'm not saying 1 to 3. I'm just saying I need index value 1 and then I need index value 3. And when I run this code over here, I will get the index value 1, I will get index value 3, and only the columns that I have mentioned in this particular section, which is course ID and duration. So that was the loc method that we saw. There is another method called as iLOC. Now in this iLOC method, this is an integer based selection of rows and columns. Over here, the rows accepted the integer values, but the columns did not accept the integer values. I cannot pass in something similar to what we passed in the rows here in the columns area, and that will return an error. But when we use the iLOC function over here, so when I pass in 0 is to 3 and 0 is to 3, I'm referring to the index value of the rows which starts from 0 until 3. So I'm referring to 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 to 3 rows, indexed rows, and then it also considers the columns as the index values beginning from 0. So course ID is the 0th index value, course title is my first index value, level is the second index value, and duration is the third index value. So when I come over here and run this code, you will see that it's now extracting the first 3 rows and the first 3 columns. Likewise, if you want to extract just 3 rows but all the columns from that particular data frame, you can just simply leave it like this, or you can simply just run 0:3 and leave the column section blank, and it will return all the columns from that particular data frame. And if you want to return from the index value 1 up till 4 and within all the columns, you can do something like this: 1:4, and it will return the first index value, second index value, and the third index value. And I can do something like this as well, call it 1:4 and then -2 and then blank, which says that it only needs to return the last two columns from that particular data frame. You will see that level and duration has been returned, and these are the last two columns within that particular data frame. And now that we know how to access the data from the data frame, let us look at how can we modify the data. So let's look at the data frame that we have over here. So this is the table or the data frame that we have over here: course ID, course title, level, and duration. So let's look at how can we modify the second row over here. So I have my course title, which says Coding for Entrepreneurs Basic, but this is marked as expert level. However, this is marked incorrectly, and I want to change this to a beginner level. So let us access this particular column and row data using the loc function. So I'm saying I need the first index value, which is 1, and then I'm passing in the column name, which is level. So it's going to only fetch me this particular value from the entire data frame. So when I run this code over here, you will see that it has now returned the value as expert level, which is fetching from this particular data frame. And now let's change this df_courses dot loc 1, level, exactly what we have over here, and then I'm assigning this as beginner level. So whatever I have after is equals to, which is beginner level, will get assigned to this particular loc value of that data frame. So when I run this code now, we will see that this gets executed, and when I recall this particular code again, you will see that it has, instead of saying expert level, it has now been modified to beginner level. And when I call in the data frame df_courses, you will see that the second row over here, Coding for Entrepreneurs Basic, has been changed to beginners level. So let's quickly do a recap of what we have learned today. So we learned how to import the Pandas library, we learned how to create a list, NumPy, and convert that to the Pandas series. And then we learned how to perform some calculations within the Pandas series. And then also we learned how to create a data frame. We learned how to access values from the series. And then we also learned how to create a data frame. We learned how to access values from a data frame. We also learned about accessing rows and columns using the loc and the iLOC method. And then we also learned how to modify the data using the loc method. This can also be modified using the iLOC method. So loc method is one of the ways to update the data in a particular data frame. So that's it guys in this particular tutorial. In the next week tutorial, we're going to learn about how to import CSV files or an Excel files into Python, and let's see how we can manipulate the data. A lot more exciting stuff is coming up, so stay tuned. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and also don't forget to press the notification bell icon, so whenever I upload a new video, you will be notified. So that's it guys in this particular tutorial. I hope you're enjoying this particular series of introduction to Python. You're learning Python from these tutorials. I hope I'm able to explain this in the very simple way. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for me, please do let me know in the comment section, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching.